There are frequent historical examples of military aid being diverted by the recipients to suppress an internal opposition, commit human rights abuses, and in some cases even turned on our own UK forces or allies.
I see the risk of any foreign security forces assistance being perceived by the locals in particular in the same manner as we perceived our local forces as accomplices or complacent.
Welcome to WarPod, a podcast brought to you by SaferWorld, asking experts from around the world about the impact of security policy on contemporary conflict. I'm Charlie Linney, Project Coordinator in the Arms Unit at SaferWorld.
And I'm Lewis Brooks, UK Policy and Advocacy Advisor at SaferWorld. In this episode, we're going to look at the risks and challenges associated with security force assistance, the practice of training and equipping military, police, and border forces overseas. This episode feels particularly important to us. In it, we have the British Army on the record talking about the risks of security force assistance and deploying it in fragile and conflict-affected countries. Not only do they talk about the risks, but they also talk about some of their own work to try and mitigate those risks and how they train British soldiers who are going out on security force assistance missions.
It's also particularly interesting because we will have someone from the British Army in conversation with a peacebuilder from northern Nigeria with loads of experience working both with communities that might be negatively impacted by security forces and also with the security forces themselves to improve their conduct. And she also has experience working with other militaries that are responsible for training the Nigerian army. Too often, conversations around security force assistance only focus on one side of the debate. So we thought it was really interesting to bring both perspectives together to explore and unpack the risks and challenges of security force assistance.
To do this, we are joined by two experts with very different vantage points. Hamsatu Allamin, the founder and executive director of the Allamin Foundation for Peace and Development, an NGO working on gender, education, human rights, and peace building, based in Maiduguri, northeastern Nigeria, a country that has seen many years of conflict between the government and Boko Haram, and a country which has received security force assistance from the UK.
We're also joined by Major George Ashton, a member of the Royal Military Police in the British Army. At the time of recording, she's also serving with Outreach Group, which acts as a thematic hub within the British Army to support and coordinate expertise on security force assistance and civil military cooperation. Over the past 3 years, she has been involved in developing a course to train and prepare individuals that are planning or delivering security force assistance programs with partner forces. So to kick off, Hamsatu, what do you see as the potential risks and challenges of foreign militaries providing assistance to partner security forces? And what are the implications?
Thank you very much. Let me correct your perspective. I'm not an expert, but I am a practitioner in the field, locally rooted. The challenges I see with the context of the conflict in northeastern Nigeria, which impact any foreign assistance coming, is the lack of trust that exists between our security forces and then the civilian population. So much so that women in my area will tell you that Nigerian soldiers are worse than Boko Haram. This is one challenge. And then our security forces are operating in a failing, or rather I can say even a failed system, where all systems and architecture for conflict management and others, including the security forces, at a point has come to be rendered very, very much irrelevant and then ineffective in the context. And then there is also lack of knowledge of human rights, civilian protection, and then the combining the roles of a warrior and protector by our security forces. And then there are a lot of conspiracy theories also flying around this escalating and then ongoing violence in the context. And then lastly, the major challenge I see is that international laws and policies are protecting and guaranteeing the interests of national governments, no matter how corrupt, no matter how failed or how complacent these governments are.
So if those are some of the challenges in the context of northern Nigeria, what about the risks for security force assistance?
In a context like this, whatever assistance coming, whatever in the face of this kind of challenges that I mentioned, I see the risk of any foreign security forces assistance coming in being perceived by the locals in particular in the same manner as we perceived our local forces as accomplices or complacent. This is one risk. And then another risk that I see in this context is being seen to be playing to the gallery. I have raised some concerns where, in fact, embassy officials have told me that we can only do what your government is comfortable with. We cannot go beyond what your government wants. And then the implication of all this I have said, we see foreign security forces assistance coming to improve or save or rather sanitize a situation. And then when they come and then start telling you, then they have to work within what your government could allow or is interested in, then the implication is that the assistance has not added any value to the situation that it wants to remedy or salvage or save. So therefore, if no visible difference could be seen in the operational capacities of troops, that troops can be seen equally like the terrorists or the extremists in our context, and then if there is no improvement in the observance of human rights or civilian protection in a conflict context, then the purpose of the whole assistance is kind of defeated.
Thanks, Hamsatu. You mentioned that one of the key issues really is the lack of trust between local forces and the population. And I think you mentioned that in some cases they are viewed as worse than Boko Haram. I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about where that lack of trust stems from, in your opinion.
Well, for example, when the insurgency started, violence was escalating. The government responded by creating what they called its joint task force. The joint task force, a task force of all security forces led by the Nigerian military, who are now brought and then stationed in our communities. At that time, the Boko Haram were right inside their communities. Some of them are living in their parents' houses. So these boys will go and then attack the security forces and then disappear back into the community. And then gradually the security forces, out of frustrations, then they start shooting indiscriminately. As they start shooting, any youth who comes out at that particular time, he is definitely shot. And then if you stay, you are arrested. When you are arrested, and then that is the end of you, because as I am speaking, those who are arrested from 2013, or some of them even before 2013, to date, there is no accountability, no information about them. Nobody knows whether they are dead or alive. So therefore, in fact, at that time, even women of my age started to join the extremist group, and then they encouraged their young ones to join. They said to take revenge from the excesses being committed by the Nigerian military on the community members. So much so that we become polarized. We as community members are on one side, the military forces are on one side. So this increase, and then once anybody is arrested, there was a time my son was even coming from school. There was an incident. One of his friends was shot dead, and then the other one was shot in the leg. Mine didn't run, but then he was caught and beaten to the point of near death. And then they give at the military detention facilities. I live near it. Daily you will see people blindfolded being brought in. Nobody was ever given any access. Those who came out from that detention facility narrate is a horror, that in fact we call it house of horror rather than a detention center. And then even the survivors of Boko Haram, women who have been abducted and then have suffered ordeals in the hands of Boko Haram, after being saved or they run away from the Boko Haram, they fall into the same ordeals in the hands of the Nigerian military. While brought into their detention facility in the name of screening, they suffer the same ordeals in the hands of the military. So there are a lot of issues that, in fact, at a point, I have to create what I call a database of invisible children. Who are the invisible children? These are children who were conceived and born while their mothers were in captivity with the Boko Haram or in detention in state detention facilities. So these are the kind of things that make people distrust. And then even you see something, you cannot go and report to them, you cannot communicate to them because you fear for your life.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Hamsatu. Thank you. And sorry to hear those things that have happened to you and your family in the past. You also mentioned some kind of improvements, which I think we'll turn to later on in this episode. Perhaps staying with the theme of risks, I'll turn over to you, Major Ashton, and get British Army perspective. So before we do that, perhaps if you could just explain what Outreach Group is and interest in SFA and Outreach Group's role in it, and then we'll move on to asking about risk.
Yeah, of course, Lewis, thank you. And please call me George. So at Outreach Group, we seek to provide commanders with a comprehensive understanding of the civil environment. And we do this through a framework of CIMIC and human security, underpinned by a full cultural understanding of the operating environment. We also deliver security capacity building through defence engagement activities aimed at developing the partner nation's understanding of that civil environment and its place in the military planning and activity.
For those who don't know, CIMIC refers to Civil-Military Cooperation.
We've just heard from Hamsatu a few of the challenges with security forces in northern Nigeria, and she gave examples of lack of trust between communities and security forces. She talked about how women have faced harassment from Nigerian soldiers. And she talked in general about the very difficult environment where those kind of systems aren't working as well in that difficult security environment. From your point of view, do you see sort of similar risks? If we take a more global view, are there similar risks of introducing training and capacity building to other security forces around the world?
So SFA activity does undergo quite a bit of due diligence from the government and from the army before any activity takes place. But of course, as always, it does have its challenges. And I think from our perspective, understanding the needs of the partner force is the first challenge. The needs are often not fully transparent and can be different to those that are articulated. So understanding these from the outset are key to ensuring that the UK actually adds value. A lot of initial work must be done on the analysis, and this must be done together with the partner force to try and understand everything from the outset in order for the UK to be able to actually help and deliver improvements. And part of this is actually understanding the drivers of the activity in the first place. So is it because of operational failures? Is it because of movement in the operating environment? Are there technological advances that the partner force require, or is it just an increase in budgets that has driven us to get to this point in the first place? Capacity building is a major part of defence outputs and may be conducted also as a wider operation, which is something to be aware of. So the activity may actually be contributing to a longer term programme of engagement with the partner force that serves both the partner force but also provides access and influence to the UK. And achieving this in a strategic way is easier said than done. And then this leads me to our biggest challenge in SFA, which is sustainability. So SFA involves persistent long-term engagement. This is not always easy, and especially if there is a limited understanding of the partner force. So without that understanding of their institutions and their processes, and without that long-term engagement, sometimes SFA can lack value for money, which are the challenges.
So thanks very much, George. Those are really helpful to get a sense of the challenges. Perhaps then if you can move on and just talk a bit more about the risks and what are the risks of conducting SFA in a conflict-affected environment?
Yeah, of course. So the risks are numerous. The partner force could use provided assistance by the UK, assistance and equipment in ways that are inconsistent with our UK aims and values. So there are frequent historical examples of military aid being diverted by the recipients to suppress an internal opposition, commit human rights abuses, and in some case even turned on our own UK forces or allies. So the partner force can engage in behaviours that are incompatible with SFA providers, with our UK values and aims. So this is a human security and a reputational risk from the outset. The next risk I'll talk about is the provision of the military assistance to a partner force can sometimes undermine the host nation governance. So concerns have been raised that improving the effectiveness and the capabilities of military forces relative to governmental institutions, especially in a highly fragile or weak state, can actually undermine the civil control of the military, often leading to military coups. SFA to some sections of a partner state security sector can also increase internal competition and develop rivalries between partner force institutions internally, undermining the coherence and interoperability of host state institutions. So this is a risk to civility. Also, the partner forces often want things different than the UK military can actually provide. So high and unreasonable expectations of what we can actually assist as the UK, and also a change in political circumstances on both parts can actually result in unfulfilled promises. The UK engagements can then fall short of expectations or even fail to produce the outcomes, which then undermines that relationship. So, this is a risk to the mission and also a risk to the UK reputation. And then one of the big things that I'd like to talk about is that the differences in culture. At a tactical level, cultural misunderstandings between individuals can actually result in conflict. But more broadly, differences in governance and accountability norms, when combined with pressure to produce results, can sometimes encourage the erosion of UK standards. So, particularly in areas relating to corruption, accountability, procurement, especially in like logistics. So, this is a force protection risk and a risk to the mission, and once again, a risk to the UK reputation. And then finally, operational security risks for the UK. So, where our UK systems and tactics are transferred to a partner force during training, then the UK ceases to have full control over these capabilities and can sometimes result in UK practices being known to the adversary, so a security risk there.
I guess one of the other things that I know that the British Army thinks about is kind of gender sensitivity and kind of understanding things from a WPS point of view. So I guess looking at some of those risks, particularly the kind of human rights ones and sort of the civ-mil relations, there's also a gendered component to that as well, right?
Yeah, no, in Outreach Group, we have actually part of our human security group, we have a huge expertise pool of gender and WPS, and it's something that we focus on in every bit of training that we do within Outreach Group. We have a gender and a WS focal point to make sure we capture that in everything that we deliver.
Thanks. So perhaps then, like thinking about some of those risks and challenges, what do you see as the sort of implications for how SFA needs to adapt?
So SFA can have positive outcomes as well as the risks that we know about. So it can be vital to help a partner force confront a shared threat, for example, be that a local terrorist group or deterring or defeating an aggressive neighbour. SFA can also help to cement alliances underpinning the collective security and also support stabilisation and democratic transitions. So I feel like SFA, must be thought of as an opportunity cost, not just a risk. Providing assistance to partners can be useful ways to contest the influence of alternative suppliers, but also provide access and understanding that can be leveraged for the wider UK benefit, regardless of the SFA outcome itself. That relationship can be the most important part of SFA.
Yeah, thanks. I think there's so many good points in there. And I think, balancing the kind of opportunities alongside the risks is a really important reminder. Hamsatu, if I can turn back to you, I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more about your experience of trying to improve the civil-military relations in northern Nigeria and what kind of mitigations you're advocating for in your work with national security forces.
I was delighted when I heard George saying designing and delivering strategies, yes, in spite of all the challenges and the risks. So in fact, they are very, very helpful, but then in the context we are operating, while designing and then delivering these strategies, are you thinking or have you thought of even making our security forces to possess or imbibe some of the ethical requirements of being a member of a security force, particularly of international standards? It's not always about even the security forces themselves or the national government. The population, members of the population of the communities or then the country that this assistance is being given to need to be taken along with, not with strategic information, but with the basic that they need to know so as to win the confidence that foreign security assistance is coming to make a difference in a situation where there are several ungoverned spaces and then where there are a lot of gaps. So if this can also be taken into cognizance, I think the confidence of the population could be won. There are good practices that I saw of recent, particularly with the UK mission in Nigeria, where the officers coming, some of them retired, police and then military, they come and then mingle with particularly some trusted partners, some trusted civil society actors to get more insights. I can't see a foreign military assistant official going down to the communities, no. But then, through some trusted partners, in fact, some of this information of what they need to know and then understand can be, in fact, stepped down and then so that the foreign assistants can win the confidence of the masses and then make their own contributions rather than looking behind and then seeing everybody as the same. And then where in the context of the current conflict in not only northeastern Nigeria, but across the Sahel, where several different actors are coming. All of them are white men, sometimes in similar uniform. You wouldn't know who is a UK official, who is from France, who is Wagner man. So I think there are certain information that need to people need to be aware of, in fact, and then the security forces also encouraged to understand that yes, civilians have a right. I'm not sure whether I can call it a right, but have the privilege of getting some information and then get some knowledge so that at least those who are caught in the middle between the communities and our security forces can be able to facilitate this kind of sensitization, sharing the knowledge and others in the communities. So if such could be imbibed, I think it will go a long way.
Thank you, Hamsatu. You also talked just there about how UK officers were starting to connect with trusted civil society partners whilst thinking about that kind of operating environment in northern Nigeria. Am I right in thinking that that also happened to you specifically, and that's helped to improve your connections with the Nigerian security forces?
Yeah, definitely. In fact, I have even identified some of the good practices that I saw happening of recent, but it's a very recent development. But even as far back as 2020, during one of our advocacies to the theater command, the theater commander at that time, who is currently the chief of defense staff of Nigeria, told me that, Mama, we military officers are also victims of your people. He said, we are victims of your people who know and see the Boko Haram, but they allow us come to attack us and then kill us without even alerting us. Are we not victims, Mama? So you see the mistrust now. The civilian population don't trust them. They also don't trust us. This is as recent as 2020. So everybody claiming to be a victim of the other. This is the context. So in this kind of situation, honestly, I really appreciated when the LSF came of retired military officers and then police officers from UK who came now down to the communities and brokered some kind of relationship between people like me, whose relation with the military were hitherto is that of apprehension and fear. Because I fear them, they are also apprehensive about people like me, thinking we talk a lot, we are the people who really give information. So this relationship went a long way to bring an understanding so that the military can open up to tell us they see themselves as victims of we, the common people. So now that if we, the big population, are now see them as abusers of our rights and others, and then see them as an enemy, and then they also see themselves as victim of us, then well, we are all victims. That gave us an opportunity to now sit down and understand each other. So that at the end of the day, in fact, the commander was telling us, if you see us doing anything wrong, please let us know. And that relationship from then brokered by our retired military assistance team and others, in fact, continued that every theater commander that comes, in fact, we are given an opportunity to go and then see them and advocate for them and then enlighten them. And then gradually, when they were now, the training on CIMIC came about for the officers in the Northeast, I was particularly brought in, but at first, like unofficially, can you please, we are inviting you, Hamsatu, can you come and then share some of your experiences? I said, well, that's a good opportunity. When I went, honestly, the soldiers were so happy. Now a civilian activist is coming in their midst, and then to tell them this is the perception they have about them, and they also opening up. And it is from there that I really understand how they also were in a difficult situation. Because some of the questions put forward across to me by an officer during the first training in Maiduguri is, why do you people always accuse us soldiers when we do anything in the while in counter-insurgency operations, but you see the Boko Haram doing a lot of things, humiliating soldiers, but nobody speaks. So which means that there is a lot of gaps. There are a lot of ignorance even among them. In fact, we have to open up, and some of their officers have to stand up to tell them that really we are operating on a set of rules. So these are the kind of things it really opened our horizon to really understand. And then that from that time, then that call for to participate in the training continues. So I have been called specifically to be part of the British High Commission team training Nigerian officials with the defense headquarters. We went to Port Harcourt, we went to Kaduna, so that in fact, at a point now that I have been even asked to come with one of my survivors to come and then be part of the facilitation so that she can share her real life experience of the kind of thing, not an activist talking or the community talking, but the person who has gone through, so that, because we were talking all along, bringing in cartoons to demonstrate, unknown to them that there are people who can come out and then really tell them that yes, these are the situation. Whatever committed by your colleagues in the course of counterterrorism operation is not you, but it's your institution. Really, there are a lot of changes now. So since the beginning, in fact, there are a lot of some of these good practices, but practically, I am a clear example of one of such good practices that have been included and is making a lot of difference, in fact, and then enlightening the communities, and then changing the narratives and then perspectives of the common man on our security forces.
Thanks, Hamsatu. That was really fascinating to hear all of your experiences and work on this issue with the National Security Forces in Nigeria. George, I know that the British Army has been thinking about these issues for quite some time. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about some of the mitigations that you talk about within that course, and whether any of those resonate with some of the points that Hamsatu was mentioning.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and completely understand the apprehension that we often see about the UK forces and what they're doing. That, we experience that a lot. So I will reiterate here again that the requirement to understand the partner force and the wider strategic environment, including the civil population. So SFA has to be nested within a wider country strategy. We know well that SFA programs will not be effective without those wider considerations, including the rule of law. So the awareness of wider strategic and political context to appreciate those risks and potential for those second order effects is crucial. The importance of understanding the context and building those relationships requires early considered planning and early engagement. And at Outreach Group, we prepare those that are planning or delivering SFA programs to plan appropriately and prepare to enable some of those tactical risks, such as poor delivery, to be mitigated through robust training of the UK troops before they go out there. Also, not a mitigation, but a positive point is that there's a large soft power element, which is not always considered as well, which is building those relationships. They are absolutely crucial, sharing UK values and developing an understanding of how to operate together. The SFA Planners course is important as it shares best practice and ensures minimum standards for the development and the delivery of any activity. The course also allows students to gain a full understanding of the risks that are out there, those apprehensions that will be there when they get into theatre, the challenges of SFA activity, so that positive impact can be increased and that negative impact managed. So we teach how it should be planned, but we also highlight those many challenges out there, so how it really morphs into reality when they get out into theatre to deliver.
As both of you have talked about, we've seen this evolution of not only the context in Nigeria, where the relationship between security forces and the communities have improved in recent years, and that kind of practice of SFA. But George, you've also talked about some of that evolutions and the creation of the Security Force Assistance Planners course. I guess then the question is, what next? What would you like to see security forces doing moving forwards? And how would you like to see security forces engaging in conflict areas as the sort of world changes?
So SFA in its purest sense is about capacity building, knowledge and sort of best practice in another nation's force. But in a less pure sense, it's about soft power, it's about building relationships. And although SFA is not necessarily UK security forces engaging with civil society, organisations and civilians, that sharing of information and the knowledge of the civil population and a more comprehensive programme in locations moving forward is really important. We spend a lot of time on the planners course teaching about stakeholder engagement, understanding as much as we can about the area that we're going into, what other organisations are in the area, and this includes the civil society organisations. And that initial engagement and knowing who's there, sharing that information, again, I have to emphasise is really crucial. At Outreach Group, we understand how closely connected security force assistance is with capacity building, civic activity, human security, and the cultural understanding. They're all interconnected. They don't work without each other. So these core themes guide the development and delivery of all the training programs that we try and deliver for Outreach Group.
Hamsatu, what about you? I mean, we've talked a bit about the evolution of, as George says, how they think about human security, how they think about civil relations. Is there anything else that you would like to see kind of expanded in future?
I think going forward, trying to identify trusty and worthy civil society partners is very, very important. And then continue with relationship brokering between governments. In fact, a lot of international actors, members of international community, or even there was a time, in fact, a member of international community who is leading some of these Boko Haram members, they call them mediators. So the boys specifically mentioned my name that they want me to be part of. Then they said, they were told by the government representative now that no, we don't want people like her to be part of it. So you see, in a context where governments are very, very skeptical or don't want to work with civil society, it is now I see this. I can urge the members of our security forces and others coming to work to impact broker some kind of this relationship. So I think our security forces coming and others have to enlighten also and encourage our governments on partnership with particularly civil society, which is very, very important. While the international aid and then the embassies that belong to make themselves to be seen with some of these local actors, because being seen in the group for somebody like me now working with a team of British foreign assistance team coming to Nigeria. In fact, I was even sitting next to the defense attaché and talking. That provides me security even in the context in I am operation. That is a security and protection for me as a human rights defender and then a peacemaker. So this is very, very important. And then among the good practices which George mentioned also, which I hear clearly, is the training capacity building that they give to our security forces. Yes, I really appreciate in one of those trainings that we conducted recently in northern Nigeria, those who were trained by the British team were the ones given to lead in facilitating the workshops. But unfortunately, one of them came with 145 slides to train in a workshop, 2 days capacity training for his colleagues. At a point, nobody is interested because we are just listening to one person taking us through 145 slides. I appreciate that training, but then there is more. So they need more time, in fact, more commitment on the part of our SAF assistant facilitators to, in fact, really groom them so that they imbibe the right, the ethicals, the requirements, and everything. It's a kind of reorientation. They clearly admit that asymmetric warfare is completely new to them. So they were brought to, in fact, like now acting like policemen, doing police work within community with civilian population. So these are some of the reasons that made them in the onset to behave as they were. And then lastly too, only weeks ago, I saw the military formation, the defense headquarters coming to my state, and then using the military formation here to organize a training on human rights, accountability, and others while in operations. And all of us, people like me, were all invited. This is a milestone, I can say, because I have never seen military on its own, even designing and then conducting to hold a training and then the kind of a dialogue or community engagement with wider stakeholders on civilian protection, human rights. It was a milestone. And really, this is courtesy of what I see being done by the CIMIC British Military Corporation and training teams, what they have done to the troops in my area. So I think these are some of the things which I believe, if done, will go a long way in impact, making our society safe and secure, and then making our security operatives perform better in the field, in their field of operations.
Good to hear that there's been that positive impact that you're seeing in the civ-mil relations. I think the British Army might want to review its capacity building in PowerPoint slides, though, because that sounds like way too many to us.
I was going to say about the PowerPoint slides, Hamsatu, we definitely don't teach to have that many PowerPoint slides. That's not something we do at Outreach Group, so I apologise. It's about knowing your audience and knowing what you need to get across. But no, just thank you for your time today. Like I said, going forward, the SFA Planners course is like the first step forward, and obviously now this evolution will only improve relations as we go forward in time.
Thank you both for joining us. It's interesting to hear both of your insights from different perspectives, but definitely a lot of synergies in the issues and the risks, and also the positive sides that you're both mentioning when it comes to security force assistance. So thanks so much. That's all we've got time for today. Thanks for listening.
WarPod from Safer World. This series was produced by Andy O'Connor and supported by the Joseph Rowntree Charitable Trust. You can listen to all previous episodes and catch up on the latest releases wherever you get your podcasts by searching for and following WarPod. You can also find us on X, formerly known as Twitter, @war_pod and @SaferWorld. And to find out more about our work, visit saferworld-global.org.